My name is Ed Rotenberry. I'm a retired attorney. I'm a history buff. I majored in history in college and continue to do research and read a lot about history and find it fascinating. Since we're getting close to Veterans Day, I'm going to talk about a World War II soldier that was known as the Gray Ghost. In 1939, Nazi Germany built its most notorious POW camp, Stalag 17. In 1943, 4,300 airmen were prisoners there. One of them was the man that the Germans came to call the Gray Ghost. Upon arrival at Stalag 17, a German officer would advise the prisoners that escape was not an option. If they tried, they would be captured and shot, which was against international law. When the prisoners arrived at Stalag 17, they were photographed, they were given a shower, they were deloused, and their head was shaved. They were given a threadbare blanket, a small bowl, a spoon, and a pair of wooden clogs to wear. Stalag 17 was a fenced-in compound. About 10 feet inside the outer fence was a single wire that ran around the compound about 1 foot off the ground. If a prisoner crossed that wire, he was shot. The prisoners were housed in 4 barracks. There was a guard compound at each corner of the prison. The prisoners slept in triple-decker bunks that had only a few slats. Their mattresses consisted of straw, sawdust, and bits of cardboard. There were 2 prisoners to each bunk. The lower bunks were kept empty. The prisoners had a roll call twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. There were spot checks and dog tag searches. Unless someone would vouch for a fellow prisoner, the prisoners were reluctant to befriend other prisoners because the Nazis would plant spies. The man who came to be called the Gray Ghost was Frank Gray. He was born on October the 1st, 1915 at Premier in McDowell County, West Virginia. During World War II, Frank Gray was a tail gunner on a B-17. He was with the 92nd Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force and was stationed in England. On his 12th mission over Germany, his plane was shot down. When the plane was hit, the intercom system was knocked out, so Gray was unable to talk to his fellow crewmen. He had to bail out of the plane. He later said that when he hit the ground, the Nazis were waiting for him. A German police officer put him on a motorcycle and he was taken to jail. The Nazi SS then got him and took him to their headquarters. He was then transported to Stalag 7A, which was Germany's largest prisoner of war camp. During the following year, Frank Gray escaped 7 times. During one of the escapes, he was able to get on a freight train on a flatbed car that was carrying anti-aircraft guns. He disabled the guns and threw parts in the fields as the train passed by. On another escape, he punched a German officer in the face while 2 German soldiers were transporting him back from near the Yugoslavian border. The 2 German soldiers told Frank Gray that his escape days were over, that he was going to be taken to Buchenwald concentration camp where he would be gassed. They put him on a train, and that night the train stopped at infamous Stalag 17. Frank Gray was known as a master of thinking on his feet. Within 20 minutes, he had made his way into one of the barracks at Stalag 17 and had made contact with an elected leader inside the barracks and asked the leader to help him escape. He was placed in a one-hole latrine inside the barracks. Before Gray had arrived at Stalag 17, the prisoners were in the process of digging a tunnel. They had learned of an abandoned sewer pipe that ran under the barracks, under the compound, under the fence, and out into the fields. They had used slats from the lower bunk to build a hatch to cover the tunnel's entrance. They used a knothole to lift the hatch. They used a loop that they had fashioned into a saw from a wooden barrel to cut the lumber with. They had dug a 7-foot vertical shaft using cans of milk that they had sharpened the edges. They then crimped the cans and had made a 2-gallon bucket to remove the dirt. They were taking the dirt and putting it into the ceiling of the barracks. During this time, the guards continued looking for Gray. The prisoners heard that the next day that the Gestapo was going to show up with dogs to try to find Gray. The barrack leaders decided at that time that they were going to have to hide Gray in the tunnel. They used milk cans to put air vents and then put Gray inside the tunnel. Gray knew that he would be killed if he was caught, and also that the fellow prisoners that helped him, they would also be shot. When Gray was placed in the tunnel, he wrote a letter to his family advising them what happened in case he did not make it. The leaders were also aware that the dogs might be able to smell Gray's scent, so they took lime that they had used at the latrine and placed underneath the hatch. The next morning, before dawn, the Gestapo showed up with their dogs. They herded all the prisoners into the compound. The guards, along with the dogs, went in the barracks. The guards used steel rods to beat on the floor. They sent the dogs under crawl spaces, and they searched for 3 days, but they were unable to find Frank Gray. The prisoners continued to dig on the tunnel, but they were unsuccessful in connecting up with the abandoned sewer pipe. At this time, the prisoners heard that the American Army had crossed the Rhine River at Remagen and was now in Germany. So they stopped digging. They then heard bombing raids getting closer to Stalag 17. At this time, Frank Gray said, "It's time to escape." So he contrived a plan to exchange dog tags with a New Zealand prisoner who was in another barracks. He waited until there was a blinding snowstorm so the guards in the towers could not see them. He got out of the barracks, made his way to the other barracks, and switched dog tags with the New Zealand prisoner. Using the new identity and the dog tags, he volunteered for a workforce that would leave the compound and was going near the Yugoslavian border. While working with this work group, he volunteered for another work group that was going into Austria. While with this work group, he met a Yugoslavian general who was fighting with armed resistance in Yugoslavia because at this time the Germans controlled Yugoslavia. The Yugoslavian general asked Frank to drive drive his truck, which was full of equipment from Austria into Yugoslavia. Frank agreed to do this and was successful in getting the truck and the equipment out of the country. On a Sunday on April the 8th of 1945, American P-47 Thunderbolts flew across Stalag 17. At this time, the prisoners were marched out of the compound. Frank Gray survived the war. He had humiliated the Nazis with all his escapes. Due to their inability to capture him, they had dubbed him the Gray Ghost. He is the only prisoner ever to escape from Stalag 17 and never be recaptured. After World War II, he stayed in the military, and during the Korean War, he was with a bomb group of B-29s, and they flew 57 missions into North Korea. After a 23-year career in the military, he retired. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross, a Purple Heart, and a Prisoner of War Medal. In 1999, Frank Gray attended a reunion of Stalag 17 prisoners. At the reunion, he apologized to the fellow prisoners for the risk that they had taken in hiding him and helping him escape. The prisoners told him that was the greatest moment of their lives, when they had helped him escape and hide. They said that the Gray Ghost was a revered man to them. After his military career was over, he refused to talk about his escape exploits. He knew how relentless the Germans were, and he was always afraid that they still had a price or a bounty on his head. Frank Gray died on February the 9th of 2006 at the age of 90 in Jacksonville, Florida. That's where he is buried. His daughter said she believed that her father's honor kept him fighting for his freedom. He had sheer determination and willpower. And I think the Gray Ghost story is one that we should remember and be proud of his willpower and his self-determination and his love for freedom. It should be an example for us all.